Welcome, I'm Luke Begley from Liberty Real Estate, and today I have the privilege of being joined by Elsa Francisco of ECF Arquitects, the group behind some of the most impressive and beautiful villas built here in Quinta, Lago and Loulé. Elsa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm very proud to be here. With the new legislation, there isn't actually that much difference. So everybody seems to think that it's a simplified process. But what we have to submit is pretty much the same, or we have to have all of the documentation in place anyway, even if it isn't submitted to the local authorities. So we have the licensing procedure, which is what we always tend to go for, and we have the Comunicação Prévia. And the basic difference between the two is that the licensing procedure is a much more phased procedure where you would obviously do the sketch design directly with the client, then you prepare the architecture, that would go into the local authorities and they would approve that. And then after that you would submit the engineering. With the Comunicação Prévia, people tend to think that that's a fast-track process, and what tends to happen is that, it takes you much longer to put all of the package together to then submit everything, including already the chosen builder. And that goes all together as a package. The only difference is that you then automatically can just make the payment and you go into building. But in terms of timing, it doesn't make that much difference, okay? With the licensing procedure, as architects, we prefer that because we have the return from the camera, the local authorities saying, okay, this has been approved, and that makes us feel secure, that we can then progress on to the next stage. With the Comunicação Prévia, you actually assemble everything together, put that in, and you can start building straight away. So if there are issues, they actually tend to come up during construction, which for us it's not great. Not great for the client either, because obviously, you can waste time and of course a lot of money, because if something's wrong during the construction, when something's wrong on paper, you can fix it very easily, very quickly. If it's during the construction, then it's a lot more difficult, obviously. The difference now with the legislation is that we had a choice pretty much as to whether we would go for a licensing, and there were certain situations where we could go for a Comunicação Prévia. But as I said to you, most of the time we would choose a licensing procedure because of the security of it. Now we don't actually have that choice. So in an urbanization like this, we are obliged to go for a Comunicação Prévia. So that's the major difference. So in effect, what the legislation has come to do is to put the onus and all of the responsibility on the technician, so on the private sector, and the public sector takes a back line. In relation to the clients, the process, it's a procedure. That's it, and the procedure is what has been affected in relation to the new legislation. And we have to just explain that. It's a case-by-case situation. So each project that comes our way, we have to analyze it, we have to see where it is, and then make a decision, okay, we can go for a licensing, or we have to go for a Comunicação Prévia, and then explain that to the client. Because obviously the timings are different and their input also will be different. Well, I think that the collaboration between architects and interior designers should be right from the beginning. It's much more efficient. If we have situations where the client has the full team and they already have the interior designer at the beginning of the process, and that collaboration just makes it much more efficient, and there are no abortive works during construction because the interior design is already there saying, okay, I would like a switch here, or I'd like whatever it is, and we put that into the drawings, and so definitely more collaboration, much better. It obviously varies because it's dependent on the client and the client's brief. But I would say that on average, maybe a 6-month period between meeting the client, understanding his brief, and then translating his brief into drawings and a 3-dimensional object. So yeah, I'd say probably about 6 months would be the average time between receiving the client and putting it into the local authorities. The builders get involved, or at least the client can get the builder involved at a slightly later stage. So you don't need to bring them in straight away at the design stage. The builder tends to come in when you already have a project outlined, maybe not the detailed design, but certainly the architecture and possibly the engineering package complete. So that's when the builder tends to come in. Of course, that's a process which also takes some time, because generally what we say to our clients, if they're working here for the first time and they don't know any builders, is to actually go and look at the builder's work, introduce them to the builder so that they can see whether there's a good line of communication, because it's a period of a year or maybe 2 years that they're going to be collaborating, and the contract is between the client and the builder, so there needs to be a good connection. That process sometimes can take a bit of time for the client to actually make a choice. But I would say that the builder comes in once the project is actually on paper, at least that. We do that, but not always. There are 101 variations to that situation, because sometimes we get clients which have already come in with a builder and they already have their project manager. We have a lot of those situations because we have a lot of repeat clients. So the whole team is already put together anyway. So we end up not actually going for a tendering process, but we may be involved in the site assistance, where we assist in terms of design. So, resolve situations that come up on site and provide design solutions. So there's a whole variety of situations when it comes to the actual building process. The hiccups that one can encounter during building are many, of course, because the building process, there are lots of people that are involved, loads of people. It's not just the architects, it's loads of engineers. Of course, it's the local authorities. It's private entities like here in Quinta do Lago, you have Quinta and so on. And then, of course, the whole building team and all of the subcontractors. So there are 101 things, unfortunately, that can go wrong. So, it is a question of trying to manage that and also manage the client's expectations. Not only in terms of design, but of course in terms of construction, there's quite a difference. Because when you have a new property, it's a clean slate. So you do the design, you have all of the engineering that's put together. It's a linear process. When it's a refurb job, of course, depending on how major the refurb job is, but a lot of the times here, the older properties have major refurbishments done. And of course, with all of the Euro codes that we're obliged to comply with, the older properties don't, and we have to try and find solutions so that we can bring the property up to the standard which is required today. both in terms of structure, water drainage, thermals, the acoustics, everything. So, and then of course it's not a linear process, because you design something, and then once you actually get on site and you start demolition work, then you discover all sorts of things, and then you have to be present to try and resolve and change the solutions, you know, give new solutions for something that you weren't expecting to find on site. If everything goes smooth, it probably takes 2 to 3 months. The process now with the new legislation, there's not that much difference, really. You know, you have to still get all the certifications in place. So that's the energy, the acoustic, and then the builder has to deal with a few of the other certifications like telephone and electricity and so on. So all of that needs to be in place anyway. So in relation to the legislation, there are a few changes, but in terms of procedure, it's not that different. And as I said, it takes about 2 to 3 months to get the habitation license if it goes smoothly. If there are other hiccups, then you have to, it might take a little bit longer. I think that in relation to the local authorities and them doing the inspection for the habitation license, I don't have the experience yet, but I suspect that with the new legislation that will happen. There will be more inspections all the way through the process, irrespective of not just in relation to the habitation license. I think and I've heard that the inspection, they've brought on a lot more people to do the inspections at this particular local authority. So I suspect, yes, we will get more inspections. If you're new to this, start as early as possible asking the questions. Get hold of your architect and ask him the questions at the beginning, even before you buy. That's crucial to understand how the process works here, because it'll definitely be different to how you may be used to it working in your own country. And the architect should then actually explain the whole procedure. And if there are any incongruencies, which are quite common between the property's paperwork, the existing project, if there is a house on the plot, all of that you need to understand that, so that you know what you're going into, so that you can, again, it's about managing the client's expectations, because sometimes clients look at something, they think I'm going to do this, that and the other, and it might not be possible. So it's better to know that at the beginning, so that they can make a decision as to, yes, that's the property I'm going to get. I understand, I accept that there are issues here, but we will be able to work with them, or no, I can't work with this. You know, I think that's better for everybody involved, for the agents, for the architects, for everybody, and especially for the client. There are variations, but I'll tell you what our office tends to do. Because we've been doing this for a while, we can actually prepare fixed fees, which is what clients tend to prefer. So we phase our fees. We start off obviously with the brief and the sketch design. And from the sketch design we go on to architecture, from architecture onto engineering. This in terms of the planning process. And at the beginning of each phase we will ask for a payment, and then at the end of that phase we'll ask for a further payment, so that the client knows exactly when we start and when that phase ends. This is quite important, especially with the sketch design, because once you progress the sketch design onto the architecture, there may be a few tweaks, but there shouldn't be any major changes, because otherwise then there's abortive work, obviously. So it makes it clear for the client when you start and when you end each each phase. So that's how we tend to do it. I know that there are other offices which do a percentage payment in relation to the build, which is also common, for example, in the UK. That's a common way of working. But that's how we do it here. Well, our approach, I suppose, has been long before sustainability was a key issue, which is to design for the climate. So our architecture tends to be very much in terms of passive design. So we're always looking at, obviously views, openings, protecting them from the sun in the summer, allowing the sun to come in the winter, ventilation, how does that work? Cross ventilation through the whole property so that you can, reduce air conditioning bills, for example. So it is really very much a passive process, and that we've always had that in our atelier, always from the beginning. It's very much a passive design from the beginning. I do definitely prefer natural materials, but I think one has to be very practical. A lot of these luxury properties are spec properties, and they're second homes, and so people do not want to come to their second home and spend their time, looking after things and maintaining, and so I can understand why a client will choose synthetic materials. I would say actually that the synthetic materials over the last maybe, 5-10 years, it's been a dramatic improvement. It's been absolutely amazing. There's huge choice, and they can look absolutely amazing. So, it really is a question of practicality more than anything else. I would say probably that you start to see the difference between spec build and building for the owner. So there is a tendency actually that the owner might want more natural materials, and they're prepared to take that on, whereas with a spec build you might find more the synthetic materials. Maybe, but that's the kind of gist that we see. It would be the open plan arrangement that's been going on, and I think that will always continue. So I think the functioning of the villa, the layout needs to be very user-friendly. It needs to be very practical. Even with a very, very large houses, it must be continuous and easy to understand. I think that will always be the case into the future.
Elsa, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure sitting with you and getting to learn some of your wisdom and knowledge.
Thank you, Luke. The pleasure was mine.
And thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for more interviews with leading experts in the luxury real estate market as part of our Liberty Insight series. Visit libertyrealestate.pt. See you next time.